and they're going to tell us all about their debut and how they write together. If you could tell us a bit more about yourselves before I talk about the plot.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Colette, and I am one half of Ellery Lloyd.
And I'm Paul. I'm the other. We're also a married couple.
Yeah, been together 10 years this year. We've remembered.
And this is the first novel that we've written together under the name Ellery Lloyd.
Yeah, because I was researching you before the interview, and I noticed you've written three by yourself, Paul.
Yeah. So before a couple of years ago, I wrote some kind of much more kind of comical novels about kind of relationships and modern relationships and stuff. But this is the first time we've written one together.
And your first thriller.
It is my first thriller, yeah.
And it's not my first book either, although I've written 2 travel books on Dubai. So I lived there for a couple of years and I wrote 2 guidebooks.
Yeah, because the research online said you'd written for newspapers and articles before edited and stuff.
Yeah,
I didn't spot that you'd done travel books, but that must be a different skill as doing a thriller.
Yeah, a lot more research. Well, no, we did a lot of research for this as well, but getting street names and taxi numbers and things like that right was definitely a little bit more dull than the travel books.
So before we go into the book, if you could give us a quick summary of the plot.
Yeah, sure. What's it about? Do you want to?
So it is a thriller, as mentioned, and it is told in 3 voices. So there's Emmy, who is an Insta mum, so she's a sort of parenting influencer with 1 million followers. So she's the biggest online
on Instagram.
On Instagram, yeah. So the biggest in the space. Her husband, Dan,
who's a washed-up novelist who's not quite sure about her, putting their family life online.
Although she is the breadwinner because he is working on his difficult second novel and has been for 8 years. And the third unnamed stalker who has a grudge against Emmy and wants to see her family suffer and has a very intricate and vicious plan to make that happen.
The way you divided the chapters was interesting because it was like 3 perspectives in one chapter. I've never seen that done before. What made you decide to do that?
Well, I mean, one of the inspirations was Gone Girl, wasn't it?
Yeah.
From a few years ago, which we both
loved,
kind of enjoyed and been really impressed by. But we thought we had to have one extra point of view, so it's going one better than Gone Girl. You've got in a way, you've got the two sides of the marriage, but then we wanted to have another voice in as well, and that voice is kind of, it's providing a lot of the menace
and the momentum.
Even at the start of the novel, when they're just kind of going through their lives, that there's someone kind of watching them, and that sort of building up the tension.
And that felt fairly apt, I think, as well for social media. So, Dan and Emmy are going about their lives, and you get a bit of menace. She has a few trolls, and there's a few incidents that make Dan uncomfortable, but by and large they don't really feel this sense of menace, and that was quite important for us because I think this idea of social media, you can have people 100 miles away really, really hating you or really loving you, and actually you don't know, it's entirely faceless. So I think that was quite an important point, I think, for that we were making.
Influencers are quite popular at the moment. What made you decide to go on the Monvert route?
We had a baby basically, and I'd never really used Instagram before, and she was a really, really terrible sleeper, like really bad. And so I spent a lot of time just sitting there in the dark, trying not to wake her up or trying to get her back to sleep.
Because she'd only sleep on top of you.
Yeah, I could only sleep when she was sort of like that on top of me. I just spent a lot of time, like far too much time, following other parent influencers and fashion influencers and food influencers and rabbits. I mean, you know, I just spent far too much time online. And I just
follow a rabbit.
Yeah, I followed a rabbit.
We could have done a novel about rabbits.
Yeah, much cuddlier.
Thriller about an Instagram rabbit.
And it just struck me as a really fertile ground for a thriller, essentially. And certainly what I'd read before, and some really well done books, had all been about influencers who sort of pretended to have the perfect life but actually didn't. And it was all about kind of actually their life was really crumbling behind the facade, and that's not what we've done in this. We really wanted to turn that on its head. So Emmy is very ambitious. She's completely together. She has everything planned. And actually she has to pretend to be a bit more relatable and chaotic than she actually is to get the likes.
When you were doing the social media angle, what was it like when you first came out with the book and you were doing it in reality versus fiction?
In what sense? Whether we used social media personally?
Yeah, whether you used it in the same. Obviously, it's going to be different versus reality versus fiction. Just curious.
We've got our Instagram account, haven't we? But it's not. It's all kind of pictures of our book.
Yeah, I've never been like personally. I don't know. It's funny. So my background is women's magazines, and so I've worked at Elle and Stylist and Grazia, and there's always been a sort of, you know, women's magazines do a lot of kind of personal stories, and so, and you know, I've been freelance writer as well, so that's options always been available to me to kind of write my own personal stories, you know, in print or online, and I've never really wanted to do it, and I've never been particularly comfortable doing it on social media either. I'm definitely a polar opposite of the way we write Emmy in the book, who kind of shares a version of her family life, and I've got a private Instagram account. I've got about, I don't know, 10 followers, and I know like I'm related to them all pretty much. So I've never been, other than sort of scrolling, I've never been a particularly sharey person online, so that was very different. And Paul uses Twitter but not really Instagram.
I've got an Instagram account, but it's got no pictures on it. I don't think I've ever posted anything. It's the world's most boring Instagram account. So we haven't. It didn't inspire us to do like a brilliant viral marketing campaign or anything.
No. That's completely down to our publishers. It's definitely not our forte.
When you were looking for an agent and marketing the book to the agent, how did you position it to people?
Oh, the elevator pitch.
That's a good question.
I actually, not to our agent, but we did a lovely interview with the bookseller a little while ago, and she asked the same thing. What was the elevator pitch? And I think we arrived at a cross between The Devil Wears Prada and Gone Girl. So essentially you've got this sort of insidery look into a profession that looks glamorous but actually isn't always, and I know that because I used to work in fashion magazines. And you've also got this sort of underlying tension of a thriller. So that I think was probably about where we were in our heads when we were writing it.
What was it like for you, Paul, to relate it to your students, because you're a program leader at university, aren't you? So that must be a bit interesting to relate to your students that you've now produced a book.
Yeah. It's been quite interesting. I think. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I can now, I can draw on that and, talk to people about it, and, sort of, I think sort of like the books that I've written have always kind of informed my teaching a bit. And, I'm sort of hopefully drawing on stuff I've learned from writing books to kind of to pass it on, because kind of what I teach is creative writing. But one of the big things for years is that I've been saying to everyone, you've got to workshop your work, you've got to share it, you've got to get feedback. So like, I kind of had to take my own words seriously when you're writing with someone else. I was getting all this feedback. Like,
yeah,
too much feedback, man. But I think I did actually improve the book, and having someone, to read it and give you feedback immediately was really, really, really useful.
It was actually a really nice way of sort of working together. So it's in 3 voices, as I said, the and as you've read, and initially Paul wrote 2 and I wrote 1, and then by the second draft we ended up with a bit of more of a free-for-all. So we started working in Google Docs, where you can where you can both simultaneously edit the same document, which was a really, really useful, and luckily didn't cause any didn't cause a divorce. we actually got on quite well editing each other's work, because I think we're both quite used to feeding back to other people, so we know it's never like we know not to take it personally, basically.
But I'd never feed back to my students as rudely as I would to Colette. Delete. I'm just going to take this bit out because it's rubbish. I mean? Usually I'd be much more polite and gentle.
And in Google Docs, you can see when someone else is, and when they're in the document and where they are in the document. So there'd be lots of sort of shouting up and downstairs going, "Oi, I like that bit, put it back in."
I'll stop fiddling with my chapter.
Yeah, exactly. That's not your chapter.
But also it's really helpful because like you have a tendency when you're like I do, like probably most people do, you have a tendency where you get like stuck on a bit of writing. I don't know, and you're trying to make it better, and you're like, you can spend half the day kind of just trying to make this one, and like Colette could see it, she's like, no, it's fine, leave it, get out of that, there's other important things to do. Stop fiddling away with that one paragraph.
I'll do it. Yeah.
When it came to waiting to see whether you got the publisher interested, it must have been intriguing, because you got quite an interest in the book.
Yeah, well, we were lucky in that we heard back pretty quickly. So it's really nerve-wracking when you're the day that your agent sends the book out, and in our case we had an agent in the UK and the US, and they sent out pretty much simultaneously. I think there was a day in it, because it was maybe the 4th of, I can't remember when it was, but it was they sent out within a day or 2 of each other, and then we had the weekend. And then I think we had Monday, and then we started to hear back, and that was a really lovely feeling. We had lots of we had an auction, ended up in auction in the UK, and we took a preempt in the US with our lovely editor Sarah at HarperCollins.
Yeah, to get five people interested in the UK must have been a really interesting challenge to decide who to go with.
And everyone was amazing, but it was we're super thrilled that we're with Mantle and our lovely editor Sam over here. So yeah, we feel very, very lucky with the whole process, and our amazing agent Emma as well.
Yeah, when it comes to editing with a third voice, what's that like?
Oh, you mean well, it wasn't just the third, it was 2 editors and 2 agents.
Yeah.
It was quite nice. It was quite liberating at that point to get someone else's opinion on it after, I think we had sort of done everything we could
Yeah.
do. And then at that point you had the 2 editors and, and our agent had fed into it as well. And at that point you've got almost like a kind of,
you've got your A team.
You've got like, you've made it as good as you can. And then other people have got the questions that they had when they were reading it and the suggestions they have. And you've almost got a checklist and that you're kind of working through and you're thinking, okay, how can you do that? So by that stage it was kind of quite
and we were lucky in that there weren't major structural changes, and I think that could probably have been more involved and more stressful. That it did feel like finessing it rather than sort of having to do open heart surgery on it, which was it was an enjoyable process, actually.
Having said that, though, there's someone at my university, the University of Surrey, that works on feedback, and they say it's like the cycle of grief. So you go through all these set stages, and I think it starts with anger.
Why are they asking me to do this?
And then acceptance at the end. And it's really true. Like the first time you get someone, it's like, oh, this person's an idiot. They haven't understood my art at all. And then you're like,
no, I never did that.
Hold on. Yes, I recognise that. And you do have to kind of go through these stages sometimes with feedback.
And the other thing about editors is they absolutely know their market and they know their reader, and so it's was massively beneficial.
Speaking of markets, given that you've both written in different fields, why was it thrillers you went down?
I love thrillers.
You love thrillers. You wanted it always to be more thrilling.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. That is the genre I read widely in. It's not sort of Paul's first choice. It wouldn't be Paul's first choice of read, but so that was the driving force behind that. But also I think it was partly because of the subject matter. So we were writing a book that was heavily anchored in Instagram and social media, and it would, I was going to say it would have been quite easy. Books are not easy to write. It might have been more predictable to have made it more of a rom-com or more of a sort of light-hearted, jokey. Bridget Jones does influencing. I'm by no means saying that Bridget Jones is easy to write, but I think it certainly feels like that book's been written though, and we really wanted to do something different with the subject matter, and I think that's why we alighted on the thriller for this specifically. And actually it's something that we found we really enjoyed, and so our second book is also in that vein.
So coming up with the dark voice, that must have been like completely unique, as you say, because you've been listening to lots of authors and got lots of inspiration, but when you started writing it yourselves, what was the darkest bit you came across, and how much editing did that take?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? Because
it's hard to do without spoilers.
But I think
we'll just politely avoid that one then. Yeah.
I think
I'm sure we can find a way.
The genesis of her voice, she was the trickiest, and Paul sort of did lead the writing, did kind of work on that voice. But she wasn't, how to say it without spoilers, she wasn't always who she ended up being. Her story went through quite a few versions before we ended up with what we have. And actually we got halfway through the novel and put it down for a little while because we needed a motivation that made sense in the context of the novel, and also said the thing that we wanted it to say. It's really, I don't mean to be too cryptic there, but we didn't want it to be predictable in any way with her.
Kind of stereotypes or sort of too
So yeah, and actually we put the novel down, and I don't think we would have maybe come back to it unless I sort of sat bolt upright in the middle of the night one night and gone, I've got it, and then written an incredibly long iPhone note. And the next day we sort of restarted doing a synopsis. So what we discovered, we got quite far into the novel with just having a little chat before we started writing every evening with like, oh, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And then what we realized was when we came to pick it back up again and tweak the first half and write the second half, was we needed an absolutely nailed down chapter plan with where each voice started and ended in each chapter, because otherwise it would have ended up as I sometimes say a game of literary charades. That's not what I mean. Literary consequences. I mean consequences,
you know,
not
you've got
charades.
That piece of paper and you're writing down.
You know, someone does the head and someone does the body. So that's that was what we found, and actually that is what we found for the second novel as well. When there's two of you, you can't wing it, really. And if you do, it ends up being a pudding.
Yeah, I must admit, I've discovered that because I'm writing my biography with somebody else as well, so I can understand the challenges with that. And I was interested because of how the dynamics of writing in that way, because it must be strange when you're coming up with a second book and you've finished the first one and you can't decide whether to use the same dynamic again with the voices.
That was something we really wrestled, because I think
we were conscious of it, and actually the second novel has it's a murder mystery, so anyway the plotting is more complex, and it's got more voices, so yeah, that but we did realize early on, or rather we realized before we even started, that what we needed was a pretty lockdown plan for that. And it did change, but you need to start with a roadmap, otherwise you get lost really, really quickly.
It really did work really well on audio with 3 different narrators, and also with it being a debut coming out at the same time as the book was quite nice as well. What do you think of the audiobook, and have you heard it?
Yeah, they're amazing. They've done such a good job. It's really funny here. So
it sounds like it sounded in our head. Yeah, didn't it, more or less?
There's writers. I think it's Erin Kelly that I've read. I've heard say she always reads her entire draft aloud while she's sort of going through her marks for the before submission of her novels. And we didn't do that, but now having an audiobook version, you can really see why people do it. It absolutely kind of, well, it really brings it to life, obviously, because it's actual people reading it. But you know, and so I think, yeah, it's been really nice to listen to.
When thinking about the different voices in your head, I know that a lot of authors don't select the narrators and stuff, but I know it's also been selected as possible film rights and stuff. So who would you put in as a voice or acting role for it?
That's a really good, I mean, I think obviously Amy Adams, Jude Law would be.
Do you know what we were watching? I haven't actually said this to Paul, but we were watching something with Dan Stevens in it the other night, and I think he's absolutely brilliant. And he would be quite good as a Dan, not least because he's called Dan.
Dan Stevens out of Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's good at playing kind of Prats, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
And like Dan, Dan the novelist is a bit of a Prat. He's a bit of a Wally.
I love Billie Piper. She would be, I think, amazing.
Isla Fisher.
Love her. She would be amazing.
Am I just naming people with red hair?
Yeah. How about Meryl? Oh no,
Meryl
we can't tell
Streep.
you. We can't tell you who we'd cast as a stalker because that would give the game away as a spoiler. So.
Yeah. We've got some audience questions on the side.
Would you write about lockdown?
Oh God, we've tried to avoid it.
Well, maybe when it's over. We had one idea.
Yeah, I can't even remember what it is now. I honestly think I think everyone is experiencing the third lockdown in the same way, that this kind of, oh gosh, when is this going to be over? I think I'm certainly not ready to fictionalize it yet, because the reality of it is too it's too real for everyone at the minute. There's actually a brilliant book called The End of Men by Christina Sweeney Begg coming out in April, which sounds I've sort of read the first couple of chapters of, and it looks absolutely brilliant, sort of reimagining the pandemic. But I don't think I would be ready to write any aspects of it. And there's a lot of authors I know who are desperately trying to dodge having to include it in any of their fiction. So whether that's sort of setting it in, early or late 2019 or in 2024, it's a difficult question. And I'm sure you've spoken to a lot of authors who sort of feel the same, of like, we're not quite sure what we're going to do about this.
Yeah, it is kind of a hot potato that a lot of authors try and avoid. I don't think when I tried to do it, it lasted about 2 chapters, and then I binned it because I thought, no, this is not right.
We've lost your audio.
We've lost your audio.
Okay.
We can put something in the chat.
I don't know where I've gone then.
Hello?
I'm back.
I can't.
Can you hear me now?
Can you still hear Alex? Has he gone completely?
Is it our sound? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me? It's her sound, I think. Alex, what, have you read the book?
I have, yes.
What did you think of
I
it?
have read the book. Yeah, I loved it actually because of the 3 different perspectives. It was really good audio book. Yeah.
We got you back.
Yeah, I can hear you again.
Brilliant.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. I was just saying to Caroline why I thought that the audio book was so good, because of the 3 different voices in it. It really because you've got 2 different genders from 2 different angles and 2 very distinct voices. It really worked, and I don't know what your approach is for book 2. Do you think you'd want multiple voices again on the audio?
Oh,
well, that's a really good question. I mean, what I would say about the voices is also, because we were writing together, we thought, okay, how can we make a strength of the fact that that we have our different kind of styles?
Yeah.
So that that was something that really worked together, and I think that we'd like to continue to use. It's not first person voices, is it?
No.
With the other one? So
it will be interesting, but again, I think you're absolutely right. It really enlivened people like her. So it'd be really interesting to explore being able to do that again.
Yeah, it's just kind of snapping people out of things, isn't it? And indicating where you've got the different voice.
Yeah.
So it could certainly work, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I would say, for me, it would have worked better if the chapters would have been more chapters. When the voices changed, put a chapter in there, because I didn't think it was difficult to follow on audio on occasion, but I still really enjoyed the approach. But for the next book, put the chapter divides when you change voices.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, okay, that's that's really worth bearing in mind, isn't it? Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Did we answer all the questions on the side?
I think you answered one, but there's another 3, I think.
How do you find writing together? Do you each have separate roles in the writing process?
Well, I think we kind of talked about that, didn't we?
We do to start, and then we'll mix it up and we kind of edit it.
And have we used our knowledge of influencers and Instagram to help market our novel? I would love to be able to tell you that I'm an Instagram marketing genius, but I am absolutely not. And it is a skill that you know, that is something that our lovely marketing team at Pan Macmillan have, but I do not. So I can't. We have an Instagram account. I'm probably using it all wrong and getting the hashtags all wrong. So I definitely not an expert in that field.
I didn't know how to do a hashtag.
Paul couldn't do a hashtag when we started the novel. So where's the hashtag, Colette? So
I must admit, it does take me a while to learn how to do it myself, actually.
What's it been like bringing out a book in lockdown? I wouldn't be able to tell you what it's like to not bring out a book in lockdown. So
but I also haven't ever brought out a book in the social media age as well. So I've we haven't had that thing. We haven't been to a Sainsbury's and seen it. Obviously it's come out when the bookshops are closed. So we've not had that kind of weird moment that you dream of where you can see it on the shelves. But hopefully we will with the paperback.
And that when the shop's open, we'll go and kind of take some pictures next to it. What are we reading at the moment? Any recommendations? I've got about 4 books on the go actually at the minute. Girl A by Abigail Dean, which is absolutely brilliant. I'm rereading Headlong by Michael Frayn, which is as wonderful as I remember, and Priest Daddy by Patricia Lockwood, which is great.
I do love the sound of Girl A. I mean, I love dark stuff. Just as a question to end on, because I know that you've been writing with having a child as well. I just wondered, what's the challenge of writing and bringing up a young child at the same time?
Well, it's interesting because, like, for years, one of the things that I've always said to my students is like, oh, find the time when you write best. Do you write best in the morning and And of course, when you've got a little kid that just wakes up the whole time,
you're like, I've got an hour, do it now.
You can't do that anymore. So you just have to kind of, when you've got a bit of time to write, you've got to kind of do it, no matter whether you feel like it or not. But
I've only ever written a novel when I've had, Paul's written 2 novels previously. I've only ever written a novel when I've had a child. And my top tip is I knew I could do 750 words in 2 hours. So I would sit down with no distractions for 2 hours and I would write 750 words. And then I did it again and again and again until I had my half of the novel done. So I think it's probably that kind of, and it's that directedness. If you've got more time, you'll use up the time checking Twitter or, making another cup of tea. If you set yourself a kind of manageable short chunk of time, I found that was how I was most productive, certainly when she was really little.
Also, when kids are really little, there's lots of things that you can do when you can be thinking about the plot, like, pushing a pram around the streets and stuff. If you've got some sort of things to think about and you think, all right, I might solve what happens at the end of that chapter in my head.
It's useful. It's
actually quite useful time, isn't it? Because you can't talk to them.
The idea is she talks now, she's 3, but
get them to sleep, so that's quite helpful. Also, it gave us something else to talk about, because we weren't doing anything. It was all
it was sort of nappies and purees and sleep training. And actually it's been a similar thing with COVID. So we pretty much started book 2 like almost dead on a year ago, and and we've just finished it, and it's given us something else to talk about other than, you know, all the kind of news that I've been trying to avoid basically for the past 6 months. So it's quite nice to have that as another outlet. So yeah.
So to now that you've said you just finished book 2 and book 1 seems to have gone down really well, when is the likely release date for book 2? Have you got any idea?
It will be, I think, the first half of next year, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. But yeah, that's sort of what they're looking at, and I think they decided to put it out in the UK and the US simultaneously, and think that's the plan as well next year.
Yeah.
The simultaneous thing. When COVID's over, how are you going to end up marketing it if you're doing it simultaneously? You're going to have one of you in the UK doing it, one in the US.
Oh yeah, that's
that'd be
great.
good. Yeah.
And who gets left holding the baby?
Yeah,
that's fine. I'll just...
No, I'll do New York. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. There was I think the 12th it came out in the US in January, and it came out the 21st here. So you know, there was like 10 days in it. So you know, we could fly back and forth. Unlikely, but God, the idea of that now seems quite strange. Flying anywhere.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. The idea of going on a book tour is very different to
very distant.
Yeah. How many of these have you done before?
We've done it's
this is our
Facebook
first
Live. We've
thing.
done a few American podcasts, which has been fun.
But we didn't, we brushed our hair for this.
I know, you know, it's actually on camera. So you got me in a bit of mascara and lipstick. Unusual.
Well,
first time I put it
I've
on
only cut my hair once in 6 months, so I know the feeling. Thank you so much for this evening, and I'm going to be really looking forward to book 2 when it comes out in the new year.
Thank you.
Well, if you have us back on, that would be great.
Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem
Lovely
at
to
all.
meet you.
And thank you for the wonderful questions as well on the side, and thank you for your
time.
Thank you so much.